Life is Strange Before the Storm is the second installment in the Life is Strange series and acts as a prequel to the first game. Here we play as Chloe Price over 3 years before the events of Life is Strange. This game deals with Chloe's grief and personal relationships about 2 years after her father passed away. This episode also finally shows us Rachel Amber in the flesh after the mystique of her character was built up throughout the first game. Unfortunately for us, and mainly Chloe, she had a pretty tragic past. But let's see if Deck 9 can deliver a good prequel to the first game, which I found so enjoyable, and can deliver upon showing us Chloe's past. Deck 9 did not make the first game, also, so the task was already made harder for them by virtue of that. But regardless of that, let's get into the second part of this series and review Life is Strange Before the Storm. Episode 1. Awake. This prequel starts off on the train tracks, and my first observation is Chloe is a little too edgy in this game. You can see this when she does stuff like flipping off a fence. I'm sure the fence felt really intimidated by that one. They obviously have to portray Chloe as rebellious due to her nature in the first game, but they could have thought of doing it in better ways than this. This is just stupid. Another thing to note is that Deck 9 had to get a different voice actor for this game. I couldn't tell the difference in this in my first playthrough, but once you know, you can really hear the difference. Ashley Birch is great in the first game and the bonus episode, but Rihanna DeVries does a good job in this game of capturing the spirit of Chloe Price in a manner that suits her. I stated this in the intro, but again, you may know that Deck 9 did not make the original game. That was Don't Nod, but Don't Nod gave permission to make the prequel for this, as Don't Nod are too busy making the second Life is Strange game, which will be the next part of this series. Chloe's texts in this game with Max devastate me. You can tell how badly she needs a friend in this time, but her biggest one abandoned her when she was most in need. This sense of abandonment carries on throughout the first episode, with Chloe scared to ruin the few relationships she has. The RV in this game has a Fight Club reference. Just wait for the episode 3 twist, where Brad Pitt comes in and prevents Rachel from dying somehow in some legendary canon-breaking event. You may understand this RV as having the Breaking Bad license plate in the first game, so Frank must have changed it somehow. Maybe he just likes both these TV shows and movies. Obviously in the first game, Chloe did not have superpowers, so this game had to create a new gameplay feature, and I am not a fan of this Beck Talk feature. I refuse to believe people just move aside and bend at your will because you spoke to them in a vaguely rude manner, but I suppose there had to be some gameplay feature like the first game. It just really pales in comparison to being able to rewind time. Obviously though, I mean, I didn't expect Chloe to have superpowers, but just something a little bit more engaging and less unrealistic, I guess. And again, Chloe is way too edgy. I vaguely understand it though, because she is 16 years old in this game, so some questionable decisions are going to be in order. Once we go inside the mill to see a concert, which is our goal right now, we can speak to Frank. Maybe we should warn him ahead of time to not groom minors in this universe. That might help the future. Maybe Rachel won't fall into a pit of being in a relationship with someone nearly double her age, which is just, again, disgusting. But if you want to hear that, watch the first video. I went into that in depth. My playthrough again was without music, and this scene in the mill is just so goofy without music. It is quite funny though. The band we're also seeing is called Firewalk, which is another Twin Peaks reference, which is the name of the Twin Peaks film, Firewalk for me. Then, in the mill, this random guy bumps into us, but he can hold that though when he gets hit with a bottle. He's a random grown man trying to beat up or rough up a 16-year-old girl. This is Rachel's introduction to us though, where she throws a bottle at this guy, and it's pretty cool here. She really helps us out when we're in need. But am I the only one that thinks Rachel sounds vaguely Australian in this scene when she speaks to us? I don't know though. You can tell me maybe. After we've been at the concert with Rachel though, and all that good stuff has happened, we wake up back in our room, and this is a mirror image almost of the first episode of Life is Strange for Chloe lying down in her bed. It's quite an atmospheric scene, and it just, settles us into the game. I can see this being quite exciting for people who played the games as it came out, because there were about 3 years between the first game and the prequel. So it must have been fun being back in these familiar environments for the first time in 3 years. I wish I did. All my playthroughs of this game were about 3 years ago for the first time, and I rattled through the first 3 games pretty quickly. In the house, we can speak to Joyce, and I really feel for her, given Chloe's attitude and all she has put up with in the last couple of years. The lack of a major plot in this game, and in particular this first episode, means the choices are mostly just dialogue related, and they don't impact the plot again, because there's not really a plot that is directly related to Chloe. I like the approach the game takes in this regard, as this gave us a more character-driven episode, with a focus on dynamics between the characters, most notably between Rachel and Chloe, but it is also interesting to see Joyce's dynamics and how she's upset about Chloe's current situation and how she's found herself in life. This is after the loss of their father, obviously, which has obviously impacted Chloe and can justify some of her actions, but obviously Joyce is grieving just as much as her, but she's got to still live her life whilst providing for her daughter.
How about this? You don't go in my bedroom when I'm not
obviously David is in the household, as this is a prequel, and at the start of Life is Strange, him and Joyce are together. And this is an issue with this game as a prequel, where there are a lot of choices related to David that just don't make sense given the context of the first game. Surely the vast majority of the time Chloe will pick the ruder option towards David, given her attitude towards him in the first game. Canonically, I should pick the worst options here in dialogue with David, but I just feel like too much of a prick. And we know in the end that David isn't that bad, so we can allow him for once. But again, if you want to play canonically, you should be picking the rude options and being a bit of a dick as Chloe towards David. Maybe being a dick to him, though, isn't unjustifiable, though, because David still comes across as a bit of a prick. Which makes sense, considering his position at the start of Life is Strange, where he acts like this for the first few episodes. So this is fitting in with the first game. I also like the fact in this game that we can hear Chloe's thoughts throughout this game, even in cutscenes. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but this wasn't present in the first game to my knowledge. Obviously you could hear Max's thoughts when she inspect items and stuff, but not during scenes to my knowledge. Maybe some of like the flashback scenes, and also I know in class, when she obviously came back from Rewind Time. But again, I could be completely wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong. As I stated though, it's silly how we get options to be nice to David again in the car. It doesn't make sense, and there are a lot of plot hole inconsistencies throughout this game. If you're interested in that type of stuff, honestly, just go search it up, but Chloe being nice to David is just one of them. This game is also littered with dream sequences with William. These are a lot better than the dream sequences in the last game, and they help us feel William's presence over Chloe despite him not actually being there. This is more the case in the latter dream sequences though, where they get more in depth with Chloe and how she's feeling at that particular moment. This dream sequence is just a jump scare, and to be fair to it, it did get me on first playthrough. I don't understand why it's here though. David drops us off at school and mentions that he sees everything to us, but you don't see everything clearly. This will be apparent in a few years' time.
I can see you rolling your eyes.
Hello? I was actually saying
I see everything.
I'll warn everything. Elliot?
I heard you had
On campus, we bump into Elliot, who in this game is Warren, but I believe he exists solely to make Warren look better. Like, Warren is an annoying guy, right, but he's relatively harmless. Elliot is genuinely a stalker, which we'll come to see later on. On campus, we can also speak to Steph for the first time, who is another side character who doesn't really do much in this game, but I'm sure we won't run into her in many years in a different part of America in another installment in this series.
It's part of the tabletop.
Other characters have remained the same this time, like Victoria. She remains the typical high school cliche she was in the first game. Fit in well with the first game, and I guess it's fine here, but again, based off her age, she just shouldn't be on this game. It doesn't make sense. She's too young. Why is she in Max's classes in a few years, but also here with Chloe? I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense, but it's not that big an issue. Again, if that stuff really annoys you, go and look up all the plot holes. There's loads.
What's she into? You know, what's her thing? Is it drugs?
Whilst on campus, we can see Nathan getting some prequel karma from some other students, and it is elite. I don't get why his meat rider #1 here comes in to try and save him. This bullying, though, may also help to explain how he acts in the first game. Obviously, how his actions are still unforgivable, and he deserved the consequences that came his way. I was actually thankful for those consequences. When we're about to enter the school, that we bump into Rachel again for the first time since last night, and she takes us towards the drama club. In this drama club, they're doing practice for the play,
You're here.
which is The Tempest.
Retrospective.
This sparks a question directed towards us on the nature of love, and this game has this theme running throughout it constantly of true love. Obviously, this relates to the relationship between Chloe and Rachel, but the debate is their love true? Do they really love each other? I believe so, based on what we're about to see in the next few episodes. But again, this is subjective. You can play the game your own way. You can see the relationship between Chloe and Rachel starting just here. They seem like a good match. Rachel just has some aura around her, which is maybe due to the reputation she had in the first game. I give credit here to Deck 9 for even taking on the challenge of bringing Rachel to life, given what we heard of her in the first game, as a perfect individual who is friends with everyone and can do no wrong. Despite this, she is still a flawed character in this game, and I enjoy that she is not the perfect individual that she was portrayed as in the first game. She clearly enables some of Chloe's worst traits, which has caused her to become distant from her mother. All we have to do is look at the amount of times she is texted by Joyce in this game asking where she is and is she coming home. Joyce clearly yearns for a closer relationship with her daughter, but Chloe's relationship with Rachel prevents this slightly. I'm not absolving Chloe of blame in this scenario, obviously. She's still at fault, she has her own free will, but it's just allowed that Rachel does separate her from some other relationships, potentially. Once he's spoken to Rachel, though, we decide to ditch school with her, and we catch the train at the exact point where Chloe got stuck in episode 2. I'm not sure why they chose to do it at the exact same point, maybe a reference, or they just, I don't know, they're reusing assets from the last game, but it's different developers, so maybe not, I'm not sure. On the train, Rachel says how she only wanted company to the school, and Chloe was that company. Whereas Chloe speaks about how Max left her vaguely to Rachel, which hits hard again of our knowledge of the first game.
Well, I used to.
They play two truths, one lie on the train, and Rachel is pretty good at this game and printed this pretty quickly, although in my playthrough I also caught her out and called her bluff. On the train, Chloe hears Rachel say Hella. This will become her only personality trait from now on. This dialogue may be cringe, but the chemistry is there between them. We also see Rachel's bracelet on this train, which is a key feature from the first game. A certain groomer had possession of a bracelet. Once we're off the train, we go to some park and then we look for a viewfinder with Rachel. Here we play some game and imagine what certain people are speaking about humorously. The scenery by the viewfinder is beautiful, especially the ambient noise of the wind and the birds. Whilst viewing the scenery, Rachel then gets upset by something she saw in the viewfinder. She then seems a bit angrier and demands we secure alcohol. Luckily for us, random guys down the path had a bottle of wine. The talkback scene here with these guys is hilarious when Rachel is on the ground pretending to pass out in order to distract them. I'll praise this game's mechanic in this scene, but I refuse to believe people are this stupid. We steal the wine as a result of this though and then run off with it. Later in the day, we discover a junkyard, which is wonderful to see. This is the junkyard from the first game, obviously. Chloe has never been here at this point, clearly. And the scenery in this particular scene is stunning. The sunset is gorgeous. Chloe kind of makes it all about herself here, though, when speaking to Rachel. She's obviously pretty upset from what she saw earlier that we'll get into later. And I do still understand why Chloe's a bit confused here, though, at Rachel's sudden change in behaviour since the viewfinder. She has been pretty standoffish and ex-hostile to Chloe, asking her to leave her alone. Chloe then makes a grave mistake offering her a bat in order to take her anger out on something in the junkyard, when they get conflict between them.
I asked you to leave me alone. Are you kidding me? I know you're the school princess and all, with the DA daddy and the perfect grades and all the perfect little Victoria chases kissing your perfect ass, but seriously? Fuck you. Great. I'm leaving. See you around, Chloe. You can't leave! Watch me. Rachel, wait!
I can understand this given Rachel's state. She's pretty cross at Chloe and just in general. Again, we understand what she's cross at later. Chloe then asks her to stay with her though, due to her not wanting to lose a potential friend or partner. I understand this from Chloe due to the lack of friends she has currently and also her home life. This scene between Chloe and Rachel is brilliant and shows a sense of inevitability between them. Despite them departing from each other for this brief moment, it also shows Chloe's yearning for some actual friendship again after the departure of Max only a few years earlier.
Are you actually going to make me say it?
Once Rachel has left though and not listened to Chloe, Chloe then decimates the junkyard with the bat after being left alone by Rachel. Here she sees a camera which hits different. Why did Max have to abandon her, man? Well, I know why, and we may find this out in the bonus episode later.
I've never understood your hard-on for cameras, Max. You took a million pictures of us, and not one of them showed that you were gonna leave when I needed you most.
We can spot Chloe's truck here, also in the junkyard before it's been fixed up. She then also sees the car which her father was killed in, which is a pretty emotional moment and very touching. Once again, the scenery is gorgeous. This episode is not shot beautifully, but well, animated beautifully, I guess would be the correct term. After this revelation of her dad's car in the junkyard, though, we get another dream of William. These are so off-putting, and this one, Rachel is on fire. I believe this is trying to tell us that Chloe will always be attracted to her due to the aura of her, maybe, but also that Rachel is dangerous for Chloe and may get her involved in a scenario she wouldn't normally. This is the case in episode 3, where something quite bad happens. Another few theories that Rachel is doomed, maybe. Obviously, we know her ending, so we know, she didn't get a good ending at all. And this may just be showing us, though, what happens in the next scene with the fire. Obviously, there's quite a big fire in the next scene. Rachel and Chloe then meet up at night near a tree. Rachel mentions that the woman was not her mother. You might be incorrect about that.
That was my dad.
Rachel, she might be your mother. I'm not sure, though.
Right.
We'll see later.
And that
Turns out
woman
Rachel ditching school was just an excuse to try and see what her father was up to, because she knew something bad was happening, so she wanted to go investigate her father.
I thought I could catch him.
Rachel
or
states that she now
something.
hates her father for betraying her, and her mother, well, what she thinks is her mother.
I never wanna
Chloe
see
says
his
she also
fucking
briefly hated
face
her father for
again.
dying and leaving her alone.
When my dad died, I was so mad at him. For months, I felt wrong because half the time I thought of him, I wanted to scream. And the other half, I forgot.
Forgot that anything had changed. Good.
Rachel
Dad
then
took
tells
me
us the
hiking when I
heartwarming
was
story
10
about her
and it
father
started
and how much
raining.
he cared for
I
her.
fell and broke my arm 3 miles from the car. I remember screaming like I was gonna die, but my dad, he carried me down the mountain. I still remember the smell of his coat and how calm he was. And the sound of his voice and whatever's
Rachel says she
going
really likes
on
Chloe after this
between us,
day.
It's intense and new and awesome.
Wouldn't give to
They
leave
also
this
discuss
place
wanting to
and
leave
never
Arcadia Bay, which will become a
What's
common
stopping
theme
us?
throughout the next episode, particularly.
Are you serious? There's nothing keeping me here. Not anymore.
So, if I came to you tomorrow and told you to pack your bags,
I'm serious. Let's do it, Chloe. Let's leave this place forever.
okay.
This first episode is really great at setting this relationship up in such a short period of time. Especially given the fact that these characters know nothing about each other. This is unlike the first game where Max and Chloe had prior history, so, them rekindling a relationship is quite a natural thing. Chloe and Rachel barely knew each other before the episode's
Can I borrow
events.
your lighter?
Rachel then burns the photo of her and her dad, signifying a great break emotionally from him. It then seems like she can control wind vaguely when she kicks over a bin and there's a fire, which may seem kind of weird, but there is a compelling theory about her having powers which ties in with the first game. I mentioned that in the first game, though. Rachel is truly heartbroken about her father's betrayal, which is completely understandable. If one of your parents betrayed your trust and your family's trust like that, I'm sure you'd have a pretty toxic reaction, maybe. Well, not toxic, but just upset. Rachel kicking over the bin with a burnt photo and it starts a forest fire, which may be catastrophic, but it also creates really nice imagery, so who's really winning here? The ending montages from the first game continue, which I love. The fire is huge in this montage. The main thing to note from this also is that at the end there's a mysterious woman smoking a cigarette by the fire. The episode then ends. The music in this ending is great, and I normally would put up the songs individually, but this game actually has a soundtrack created by the group Daughter with an album which is just Before the Storm songs. I would highly recommend listening to that, and I'll put the album up here now, and that would just be the one time of the music in this game. It's a great listen though, really elevates these 3 episodes. That's the first episode done then. It's a very solid starting episode. The first half is quite slow, but it acts to reintroduce us to familiar characters from the first game and familiar settings. It's nice to see them again. We finally meet Rachel Amber, and it seems like the day is going quite well until she sees her father cheating on her mother in the viewfinder that destroys the image of her family to her. From this point onwards, the episode is brilliant. The relationship with Chloe and Rachel is developed well here, and I love the conflict they have, which gets resolved suddenly, which shows the inevitability of their relationship, in my opinion. We need to remember these characters are 16 or so it's only right to expect sudden changes in emotions where they fall out and then a few hours later they're best friends again. I'd probably put this episode in A tier. I think it delivers a great emotional impact in a very short space of time, and it makes me care for Rachel and Chloe. Obviously, I cared for Chloe before this, I liked her in the first game, but it's important to deliver such an important character as Rachel in such a short period of time and make the player like her, which it worked for me. But with all that said and done, we can move on to the next episode. Episode 2, Brave New World. We start off in Wells' office after being caught in 4K ditching school the other day. There is a big contrast here between Rachel and Chloe's family, which I'm pretty sure was intentional. Rachel is from a stereotypical perfect family, but as we know, this is not really the case. Wells is a massive prick here. The treatment of Chloe is different based on predetermined biases about her. Obviously she is a repeat offender, but the thing that shows this is Chloe being punished for giving Victoria fake homework answers as a joke. Victoria's the one in the wrong here. She asked someone else for homework answers. Rachel comes to defend us by sort of telling the half-truth that she completely roped Chloe along. The outcome of this choice of taking the blame to cover Rachel or letting her take it does not matter at all. But Chloe is treated with prejudice here compared to the treatment of other students. It's almost like Wells wants Chloe to be the instigator of this so he can blame someone who typically gets blamed for this type of thing. Joyce comes in clutch to defend her though and serves her duty as a mother very well. As a result of Rachel taking the blame, in my playthrough it turns out Victoria will do the play instead of her. Although again, this won't matter, you'll see later. Also, Chloe would be expelled here, but she is suspended for a year instead. She'll be expelled if you take the blame. Once again, this doesn't matter though, because as we know, by the start of the first game, she's expelled anyway. So this sort of works against the prequel element here. I don't know why it's a choice. After we get suspended, we go to clear out our locker. And then we head into a school bathroom, where I'm sure some life-changing event will not happen in 3 years here. Also, how long will this graffiti that Chloe does in the school bathroom take? There's no way Skip here just waited outside this whole time. We then run into David and Joyce in the car park. David is way too harassing towards Chloe. I get she isn't perfect at all, but David obviously won't get through to her by being like this. Joyce brings David up on this, and rightfully so. Then David decides to try and clean our pockets out to prove we're up to some nefarious activities. I'll empty them out here to make him look bad. But David is way too militaristic here. Even for him, it doesn't make too much sense. Chloe still makes a heartfelt apology though to Joyce, whilst also protesting David. She is also still rude to Joyce about David, which is more of the behaviour I would expect from Chloe in a prequel.
This is not the answer.
It's the only answer I have, Chloe.
In a million years, I never thought you'd choose David over me. I'm sorry I took that for granted.
I'm not choosing anyone over anyone else. It's about the three of us having a home together.
It'll be better than you think, Chloe. Once everything's running smoothly, you'll see what a stable home can be like.
We then end up back in the junkyard, and we fully come across the truck she uses in the first game. I love how we can view the fire from the junkyard here. It's some serious wallpaper material. We then attempt to fix the truck, and I find it funny how convenient that we find a working battery in here that miraculously fixes our truck. We then find other things to make the truck look better. The truck isn't exactly working yet, but again, we'll come to that later. Whilst we're in the truck, Frank calls us saying he's coming to our location in a moment.
Hey, Frank. What's up?
Yeah, just checking in to see how you're doing.
Really?
No. Listen, we've got some business to discuss. Where can we meet?
What about? Oh, like drugs?
Price.
I'm hanging out in the junkyard, north of town.
The junkyard. That's great. Stay there, I'll see you soon.
We fall asleep in the truck and get another dream sequence. Here with William. There's a massive fire in the dream sequence and we're toasting marshmallows in the car that he died in. William then makes a pretty on-the-nose reference between Rachel and the fire. These links between the Rachel and the fire carry on throughout the whole game. William basically warns us of getting burnt by this fire, and Chloe did eventually get burnt by her friendship with Rachel, to be fair, due to the events in her life, and also the ending of Rachel's life. Although I don't like how this possibly insinuates her getting burnt by Rachel's supposed betrayal of Chloe by sleeping with Frank. That is not on Rachel. I'd also like to note that in the dream sequence, William references there is a grade to beauty to come after fire. I think this is an obvious reference to the fact that Max will eventually show up in Chloe's life and improve it a lot.
What does fire blind with?
Beauty. But sometimes, there's a greater beauty yet to come.
Incredible.
Fire is jealous, Chloe. It wants all the beauty for itself. That's why you need to be careful.
Careful of what?
Of getting burned.
The scene in the truck furthers the increase in friendship between Chloe and Rachel. I do feel for Rachel given the situation with her father. Rachel also states how she is tired of acting performatively based on other people's perception of her, which may dictate the reputation of her that Max believed in the first game. This episode spends a lot of time setting up the junkyard, but the junkyard is mainly used as a tool to signify Chloe and Rachel's relationship, I believe. This place is where they were at their closest, and it's also tragically where the story of Chloe and Rachel ends in the 4th episode of the first game. Frank then shows up at the junkyard, and we bump into the woman we saw with Rachel's dad outside of the RV. Inside, we learn Frank really likes beans. We knew that in the first game, though. He also tells us this mysterious woman is called Sarah, but won't give us more info than that. Frank then tasks us with going to Drew's room at Blackwell and taking the money that he owes. Drew was the guy who was bullying Nathan last episode. He also owes Frank and his friend Damon some money that he got for selling drugs for them. We bump into Skip as we're about to enter the dorms to go to Drew's room. He's a cool enough guy, but I feel quite bad at having been rude to him in order to get access to the dorms, as we are currently suspended, should not be on Blackwell premises. Elliot is a complete weirdo. You can tell this from being able to enter his room in the dorms. Maybe we are also weird, though, from randomly entering his room without permission. But as we know, Elliot, again, you'll see this next episode, he is a proper wrong'un.
Jackpot.
Once Chloe enters Drew's room, we retrieve the cash for Frank, but as we are about to leave, we bump into him and his brother, who are running away from something. His brother is confused as to why we are here. Drew demands we stay in the room with his brother Mikey and don't leave no matter the circumstances. Drew then gets interrogated by Damon, who is asking for his money back. Surely Damon and Frank would have communicated, though, about this, and wouldn't be coming to collect the money at the same time. I choose to stay with his brother in this scenario, though, because Drew told us to stay inside with him. Drew's knee gets absolutely done in by Damon, which is awful for him as a football player. There's also the option to give Drew back the money you stole when leaving the room. And I have to give the money back given his circumstances. He's providing for his family as well as selling drugs. This money is used for his father, which we'll find in the next episode, so I insist you give the money back to Drew. It's only right. After this, we end up backstage ball play, and we get a view of Nathan's dad absolutely cooking him. Again, I do feel slightly for Nathan, but his upbringing does not even come close to justifying his actions in the first game.
Why do you suppose that is?
I don't know.
Because you show weakness. Just like you're doing right now.
But Dad...
When will you learn that this isn't about you and your problems? This is about the Prescott name. My name. You will not embarrass me.
Victoria then seems pretty nervous in her tent ahead of the performance. We feign support for her with Rachel. Then Rachel drugs Victoria, which is actually insane. How was this allowed in the game? Like, this is actually criminal. I don't understand how this can happen. Who thought it was a good idea to put this in? This practically invalidates her whole character. Canonically, she didn't do this for me. And the only minor saving grace I can make out for her is she's only 16, but still, it's insane that they thought including this would be a good idea. I only chose this option so I can mention it here in this video. It's my third playthrough of this game and the first time I've gone this way. Then it turns out someone else is missing from the play. Then naturally Chloe has to get drafted into this. Also during this, Victoria naturally faints after being drugged in her coffee or tea, whatever. So Rachel takes her part, and Chloe gets drafted into the play as a result of this random person missing. The scene of her changing into the play clothes is quite funny, to be fair. I'll give plus marks to this episode here for this.
I will not
now we have the play. Chloe can seem really out of place if you don't read the script to memorise the lines she has to say on stage. Rachel and Chloe go vaguely off script whilst on stage and have a pretty engaging conversation about their current relationship, which leads to them talking about running away together. This is in the context of the play, obviously. I really enjoyed the play scene and how it represents the relationship these past 2 episodes have spent building up.
Continue in thy service to my schemes, and when they are complete, I swear to thee, we shall fly beyond this isle. The corners of the world are mere prologue. I'll seek to make thy happiness so great that e'en the name of liberty's forgot. What sayest thou to my most hopeful wish? Yes, I am most pleased. Your duty done for now.
The mysterious woman was also watching this play, which adds more intrigue about who she is. Rachel and Chloe then discuss leaving immediately, which seems to trouble Chloe a little bit, given her family would still remain in Arcadia Bay even if she left.
Like I said last night, let's do it. I know. I've been thinking about that all day.
But that was...
Don't say it was just a crazy thought. You mean it. I can tell. You want this. Yeah, but, like, eventually.
I know our parents have been shitty, but we can't just leave them. That doesn't sound
This episode summarises the feelings of Life is Strange so well. This episode has such an atmospheric feeling that I find it really hard to describe. The best way I could describe it is this game is teaching me to just enjoy the slower and quieter moments in life, I guess, which is when this game is at its peak. Chloe and Rachel's chemistry here is electric,
You're right.
and I have the same opinion in the first game relationship-wise here. Chloe and Rachel should take it to the next step. They seem like a couple by learning from the first game, so canonically I think it should happen. We then plan to go to Rachel's house to get stuff to leave Arcadia Bay immediately. But before this can happen, we bump into her parents and we get roped into staying for dinner. Chloe's dialogue with Rachel's dad is quite funny. Comparing their families at the start of the episode is a good setup for how out of place Chloe feels in this environment.
It was a joke. Not a good one, clearly.
During dinner, Rachel gets very angry at her father making a speech about how important family is and that they cherish each other. Chloe's attempts to calm this are pretty awful. Funny, but awful to watch.
You can always run away from whatever's bothering you.
It then resolves into an argument with James, who goes off on Chloe being a bad influence.
You are not welcome here or around my daughter any longer. I know exactly what kind of person you are from the moment I saw you, and I let my wife's compassion get the better of me.
Oh? What kind of person is that?
A delinquent. A broken girl from a broken home.
And Rachel then absolutely loses it, smashes the table.
Why can't you just tell me the fucking truth? Stop lying! Stop being a politician for 1 fucking minute! Can't you just be my dad?
Rachel, that woman you saw, that wasn't my mistress. That was your mother.
After this, we get the truth about this mysterious woman actually being Rachel's mother. This episode ends in shocking circumstances given the information that was just told to us, and really sets us up for next episode. We get another ending montage after this, which updates us on the characters' situations. The Joyce update here is quite sad, showing the separation with her daughter. Rachel's mother is where us and Rachel also were under the lamppost just moments before when they kissed. This is a very solid episode. It encapsulates the comfort Life is Strange feeling perfectly. The relationship between Chloe and Rachel was the standout here, and it carries the episode perfectly. The play and lamppost moments are both top-tier Life is Strange moments. I will say, though, the Rachel drugging Victoria scene is disgusting, and I very nearly marked this episode down significantly for it. But again, I guess you don't have to pick that option in your playthrough, but it still is a bit alarming, and it's just as bad as the Frank stuff in the first game. Furthermore, this game also hits emotionally, though. This episode in particular hits emotionally in other scenes, such as us finding out the truth about Rachel's mother, which is a hell of a cliffhanger to leave us on. But also the sorrow I feel for Joyce's situation in this episode, and the discontent between Chloe and David, who are the two most important figures in Joyce's life who don't get on at all, which must impact her negatively. I think this episode is just, and I mean just about scrapes into the S tier. Now, I didn't predict this before playing this episode, but it took me aback by how much I enjoyed it. This episode is really a high point for the entire Life is Strange franchise, and reminds me of how much I love Arcadia Bay. Now, with that said, we can move on to the Before the Storm finale. Episode 3, Hell is Empty. We start the episode by learning about Sarah in a pretty cool way by viewing certain points of her relationship with James through a viewfinder. It is quite a tragic tale where Sarah falls into addiction. They thought the pregnancy would solve the addiction, but it didn't for long. This gives context of why he flipped out about the drug dealer line from Chloe at the table earlier. James is scared Rachel will try to meet Sarah, which is kind of understandable, but you also understand why someone would try to meet their biological mother.
By her disease again.
Even if that's true, Rachel could still meet her.
And maybe the fact that she wants to see me means she's gotten better.
Maybe so. But consider that for 15 years, she's preferred that money to you.
Rachel.
I think I need to lie down.
Rachel goes upstairs to lie down after this information overload. It's quite scary that Rachel has a photo of Nathan in her room, given we know what is about to come in a few years. The starlight moment here is absolutely lovely.
What's the point?
Rachel states her life is a lie up until this point, given the information she just got. This develops on the themes of loss in this game, which mostly are experienced by Chloe's loss of her father, but also Matt's. Rachel now feels slightly what it is like to lose somebody, but only emotionally this time. Rachel says she wants to meet her mother. This conversation about parents between Rachel and Chloe is touching, given the sort of shared experiences they have now with parents. We get another off-putting dream with William here, where he turns into David momentarily at points. And we also have people like David watching us in the crowd. I think Victoria's there as well, and some others. She boos at the end of this, which is quite funny, but it doesn't matter. We're currently on the stage where the play was last episode. Chloe says to William, these dreams in him aren't real and it is just theatre. But then William states that sometimes it is better to lie than tell the truth, which sets up the final choice later in this episode pretty well. This links of theatre here and also lying being part of theatre is quite interesting. It's what's a nice little conversation here.
Where do you think you get it
But in this dream sequence, William gets run over on stage by a truck, and this dream is pretty haunting to Chloe, who breaks down in it, seeing her father get run over, which is only natural. After this, to try and help Rachel meet her mother, we try and get Frank to help us, and he says to meet us in the junkyard. This happens back at Chloe's house in the morning.
I have a question to ask you first. I mean, a favor.
You can't be fucking serious.
I need to find that woman from yesterday. Sarah. Frank?
What the hell for?
Something important. Can you help? I would really appreciate it. I'm your favorite client, remember?
Me in the junkyard in 2 hours.
We get Chloe dyeing her hair blue for the first time. Not entirely, but just a little tiny strand of hair. This sets her up slightly for the first game. When we go downstairs, David and Joyce are together, and they are really happy with each other. David has something to say to us though, and he comes across as pretty nice here, but again, the option for Chloe and David to get on here is silly and doesn't make canonical sense, given the state of the relationship at the start of the first game. David tells a pretty sad story about his friend in the army being killed, and him wondering why it wasn't him. He says that he knows the feeling of loss which Chloe is currently feeling. They really should have bonded more after this, but as we know, their relationship is just as hostile in a few years' time. This is one of Chloe's main flaws as a person, but obviously David is not without fault either.
Roadside IED. We used to joke about all the trouble we were going to get into once we got back home. But he died. He died, and I didn't. And I think about that fact every damn day. The point is, I've had my share of grief. I know what you're going through.
We then return to the junkyard to fix the truck. This is a really enjoyable moment. We make it work, which is another thing of Chloe's from the first game. We bump into Rachel and Frank at the junkyard at roughly the same time. Damon is also there, which spells bad news. He's just a generic bad guy. He then threatens kids with a knife, like Frank in the first game. Rachel gets quite upset over something he says. Naturally, she hits him over the head with a plank of wood and gets stabbed for it. Grown man stabbed a 16-year-old girl, by the way. He deserves what's coming to him.
Oh, you fucking bitch!
Rachel! Damon! What the fuck? Chloe! Go! Now!
After this point is where some issues start to arise for this episode, though thankfully we make it back to the hospital in time with Rachel. Turns out that she'll be alright after surgery, which is brilliant. Chloe tells James about what happened with Rachel. He is quite kind to us and tells us it isn't our fault.
I just froze.
It's not your fault.
And Frank held him off so we could get to the truck.
We then go into Rachel's room after her surgery. This is another pretty emotional conversation about their current situation. This really helps up to set the sense of loss Chloe feels in the first game. Rachel states she still wants to meet her mother after these events, which is surprising after, getting stabbed trying to meet your mother might turn you off a bit from it. The major issues here, though, start to arise with basically writing Rachel out the rest of the game. They did this with Chloe in episode 5 of the first game, and I don't understand why they did it with Rachel just now.
Are you two in some kind of
We
trouble?
bump into Elliot in the hospital.
If you are,
You can tell he's hurt that we hang out with Rachel. He is extremely desperate. Once again, I maintain he is like this to make Warren look better. This will become obvious in a moment. He is a complete creep.
I don't even know what you mean.
Come on.
Rachel sends us to her dad's office with the code to try and help find her mother, given the evidence that her father may have on her. She remains in the hospital, obviously. Surprisingly, it turns out James is actually working with Damon, which is kind of sus.
James is
We need to act as James to convince Damon we are him. It also turns out Sarah has sent Rachel loads of letters, which James stopped Rachel from being able to see, which is quite bad. The puzzle tasks in this episode are very fun. After this puzzle sequence, though, it emerges that Sarah is stuck at the mill with Damon. It turns out James might actually be trying to have her killed as a means to get out of Rachel's life, which is extremely dark. As we prepare to go to the mill, though, to try and save Sarah, that creep Elliot comes out of nowhere here after following us here, which is insane. He is literally the typical Reddit nice guy. Where is the option to just tell this guy to do one and just shoot him? I'm sensing massive jealousy here. He's crying about Chloe is devoting her time to Rachel instead of him. We use the back talk to find the police to deal with him, which is kind of funny, but honestly he's just too much of a stereotype. I think he's a waste of time, his character as a whole. I really didn't understand the point of him in this game. He just wastes time from the plot, and in the end, all we learn is that the obviously creepy guy is in fact very creepy. Who could have thought? We leave the Amber House and head towards the mill. On the way there, we see the fire is stopped, but the forest is still decimated. The fire stopping may link to the Rachel weather theory that the fire magically stops after she is stabbed. This may be insinuates that she has some control over the fire, and the second something bad happened to her, the fire ceased completely. It's quite interesting. This also links to her possibly controlling wind in episode 1. But also, the grand theory here is the entire storm in the first game is controlled by her, as a way of her being reunited with Chloe. I vaguely mentioned this in the first part, so if you want to hear more about that, just search for it online. There's some theories online about this. It's very entertaining. Whilst we are driving on our way to deliver Damon the cash, we nearly crash and by veering into a truck. How many pieces of TV or film have a scene where the character nearly veers off road into another vehicle completely randomly? Once we pull over after this quite scary moment, William then pops up again once we pull over.
Truth's risky.
He says sometimes parents have to lie about things to protect their children, which gives us more sympathy maybe towards James here. Maybe he lied out of necessity to protect his daughter. This episode sparks a very interesting debate on telling the truth in these situations, and should you do it or not. Chloe says that her father not being able to tell her the lies that he kept may be a good thing, so that she never has to go through the trauma of seeing stuff her parents kept from her.
So how am I supposed to tell you anything?
I guess it's better this way, not knowing.
Then I'll always be the perfect dad?
How many people get to say that?
We then end up at the mill, where this game started, funnily enough. We see blood on the RV, which does not bode well for Frank in this scenario, as they were fighting once we sped off from the junkyard of Rachel who had been stabbed. Inside the mill, we find Damon forcibly giving drugs to Sarah. I believe the intention is to kill her here, but it also could be just to get her hooked on drugs, so Rachel would still stay relatively far away from her. Damon says James wants her out of the picture, so it has to happen. James is awful for making this happen, which is a pretty obvious assessment to make, but it's true. Damon then proceeds to beat up Chloe when she arrives, just for getting involved in the situation basically. What a nice guy. Thankfully Frank then enters the scene and starts fighting Damon. Annoyingly, that fight happens off screen, which I really don't understand. Due to Frank being in the first game and Damon not, we get a good idea of what happens, and Sarah also mentions what happens. After this, we wake up, with Sarah still here, but both Damon and Frank are gone. We have a conversation with Sarah, who says that Rachel can never know about what James did to her. Sarah says the fact that her father still loves her should not be taken from her, despite the wrong things that James has done.
James is a desperate man who loves his daughter. And she loves him. Tell her what happened here, and you'll take that away from her. Forever.
Sarah says she cannot be a mother to Rachel and that James is right about this. There is a touching dialogue option here with Chloe here, when she can say she either lost her father or her best friend. I choose a losing father, which I think is more impactful for her at this time. I think the sense of Max leaving will compound though eventually, especially in the small time that Rachel and Max are both away from Chloe before the first game.
And a truck ran a red light, and that was it.
Anything I can do.
Sarah says her drug addiction though still holds power over her, and she won't be able to beat her addiction to be able to be an adequate mother of Rachel's. Sarah leaves by saying, let her give Rachel the loving father that she deserves.
Protected her. The one who loves her more than anything. You can do whatever you want, Chloe. You have the power. What you have to decide is whether you're going to protect Rachel or cause her even more hurt. So please, tell her I was never here. Let her have what peace she can without me.
We then end up back at the hospital for the final choice. Rachel is asleep with her father and mother, and their family looks happy and back together again despite the trauma of the last day. Rachel wakes up and comments on her and Chloe never escaping. but having all the time in the world, which is tragic given the fact that we know they don't.
All the time in the world.
I hate it. I love it, but I hate what it does emotionally to me.
How did everything go? Rachel, I've got to tell you something.
We then get the final choice, which is either to tell Rachel the truth or to lie to her. I choose to tell her everything, given the heinous actions of James, though. It isn't just a relatively harmless lie, like protecting her from her mother in the first place. He actively tried to have her killed at worst, or at best, hooked on drugs again after being clean for a year, which is just pure evil. The ending doesn't differ too much, so I won't bother going over both of them here like the first part. But just know that you get some different scenes in the ending montage, but if you are that curious, you can just search up the other one. Now we can get back to our ending though. In our ending montage, James is pretty cross, but his actions went too far, and he has nobody to blame but himself. We see Frank alone outside the RV. Killing Damon is his only good contribution to this world, but he sort of becomes him in the second Life is Strange episode when he's the one threatening teenage girls. Joyce and David get married, which is quite a nice moment. That creep Elliot gets kicked out of Blackwell, which is nice to see. It's not nice to see, it's lovely to see. Nathan sits alone under a tree, Victoria is Victoria. Rachel and Chloe both leave Blackwell, flipping Wells off. We also go to the lighthouse with Rachel, which is lovely to see given the significance of the lighthouse in the first game. I believe Sarah can show up in some endings here, but not in mine. I wish he did though. Chloe dyes her hair blue completely, setting up her Life is Strange look. We get some scenes of them hanging out, and Rachel writing her name on the wall in the junkyard, which will be changed horrifically later on. Max will also add a name here optionally. I did that. It then ends with an image of them on the truck in the junkyard. There's also them in a photo booth after, of some kind, but this is only after we view the choices. Then after this photo booth though, it horrifically cuts to the dark room, where we see a phone ringing. This is Rachel's phone. Chloe is spam calling her, and we hear photos in the background, which really paints the picture of what's happening. You know what's happening, I know what's happening. It's disgusting. When I saw this the first time, it made my heart stop. Some people may not like this inclusion in the game, but I'm actually quite a fan of it. It's devastating, but I believe it's important to remind us that Rachel and Chloe did not have the happy ending that we would all want for them. One final note here is, again, listen to the soundtrack of this game. I'll put it up again because it's that good, particularly in this final ending montage, but just listen to the whole album. Brilliant. My final thoughts on this episode are that, like the first game, the final episode still doesn't quite manage to stick the landing, although it is not as big an offender as the first game in this regard. This episode definitely has its highs though, and it is closer to the next best episode when compared to the first game. I just dislike that the ending is so heavily focused on Rachel by herself, and it sort of leaves Chloe's character development out in a way. I guess she does get a development in the first game though, but I feel like the episode should have been solely dedicated to both of them and their relationship. But we get some stupid generic thug antagonist in Damon, who doesn't serve to develop Chloe or Rachel in any way. Other stuff like Elliot in this episode is just a complete waste of time. They also abandon the escaping plot line, and that's because Rachel was stabbed obviously, but it was silly to have Rachel in the hospital for a lot of this episode. She was only written out though, so she couldn't see what James did to Sarah, and so we had the choice to tell her. Also, in the final montage, surely Rachel and Chloe should be trying to leave, especially if you told her the truth. Don't get me wrong, this is still a more than okay episode, and it is a tough one to rank as well, but I think B tier is fair enough for this one. With that being said though, Before the Storm is still an extremely enjoyable game. I don't think I'll put it above the first game, but I still rate this game very highly, particularly the second episode. I feel I need to mention the choices in this game also, which once again do not matter really, but I can forgive Deck 9 for this, as they had to work with the constraints of a prequel, and you couldn't have too many canon changing moments, as we do have to reach a point where the first game's events are logical. This game is at its best when Rachel and Chloe are together. This is why episode 2 is so strong, and where episode 3 falters slightly compared to the others. I feel like this game fails in some prequel elements, as it is trying to be a prequel to the first Life is Strange game. But I love the themes of this game of loss and true love, which I believe are the main two that carry through every episode. Both Rachel and Chloe have lost something in this game, and it's part of the reason it brings them so close together, in my opinion. They make each other complete, but also enable each other in ways which cause devastation for themselves. Another wish I had for this game is that it covered more in between the gaps of the ending of Before the Storm and the start of the first game. I really wish we learnt more about Rachel's downward spiral and her relationships with both Frank and Jefferson, which led to her ultimate demise. Maybe someday we will get that though, but I highly doubt it. What we do have here though is an enjoyable prequel which does a great job in setting up our characters for a massive event to come years later, despite the plot holes present, which are not the end of the world though. I still commend Deck 9 for a job well done here with Before the Storm, but if you thought the prequel ended here, you were in fact incorrect. Bonus episode, farewell. Now for the bonus episode which I'm including in this. This episode is a prequel to the prequel, and we are back in control of Max, which is brilliant. It's just a random day in Chloe's house, which is set about 3 years before the events of Before the Storm, so that's 6 years, roughly, before the events of the first game. This would place Max and Chloe's age at roughly 13 here, though Max is a bit younger than her. Max also has the information here that she is leaving for Seattle in a few days, and she hasn't told Chloe yet. This is troubling her deeply, as she can't bear the thought of her leaving Chloe alone. We start off the episode by doing terrorism with Chloe by blowing up some dolls in the middle of her room. Chloe is so different here before a certain critical event in her life. She seems so much more engaged in life as a whole. Here we went to be throwing away things in Chloe's room, but Chloe doesn't want to throw anything away at all, and I'm not sure why. Maybe there's some deeper reason, but I've missed it clearly. We try and tell her about us leaving for Seattle, but Chloe prevents us by interrupting and finding a message they made for themselves 5 years ago.
Know how to.
Holy shit! Max, hold that thought. This must have fallen out when I was digging around in here. Do you have any idea what this is?
Whatever it is, it looks like it came out of our pirate phase.
Your powers of deduction are as strong as ever. This tape is from 5 years ago. It's a message from our past selves to our current selves.
So we were 8 years old? That's crazy. I can't even imagine what we sounded like.
Ready to find out?
This is pretty wholesome, especially when William bumps in with a message. They set themselves a task to do now to uncover an amulet which would guide them to some treasure they buried 5 years ago. We have to go to the attic to try and find the amulet of this treasure hunt that Chloe and Max at age 8 set themselves to do now. Max wonders if she were taking this view of Arcadia Bay again. You will take in this view again, Max. She also makes a comment which is funny given the future about not being able to handle real-life murder investigations. Again, you'll have to handle one quite severely later on. It is very sad looking at the family life here in Chloe's house before the event that is about to happen. Makes you wonder how life would have turned out for Chloe if just one traffic incident did not happen. I mean, we saw the bad side of this in the first game, but it's fun to imagine if Chloe actually had a stable life and what she could have achieved. This episode reinforces my theory from the first game that Chloe is the main character of Arcadia Bay. In the attic we learn a lot about her family's past. Compare that to what we know of Max's family and her past, and it's really nothing in comparison. This bit of Max staring down at Chloe also hits emotionally in the attic. As Max ponders how she is going to deal with her departure, we then end up in the garden after securing this amulet from the attic. This episode is really beautiful throughout. Arcadia Bay is always gorgeous no matter the location. We discover our treasure hidden away, but something we didn't bury is there. We then end up back in the house. It turns out Chloe's father put the treasure in a box, so it wouldn't get destroyed by the elements. William says he is proud of them both, which is really touching given what is about to happen. This episode hits emotionally every single time, especially with these letters they wrote to each other. I'll put them up here. This really helps to show us how the relationship developed in the first game. It also hits especially hard as this is our last time with these characters. Chloe then makes a comment thinking about how her parents should be home by now, and yeah, this really hurts. We can also see the photo from Life is Strange episode 3, which would tell you what is about to happen if you didn't know already, but I don't know how you wouldn't know already, it's pretty obvious. Once we finished exploring their past in the living room, you can tell her about leaving to Seattle, which I think is a must. It turns out Chloe already knew though. This is a heartbreaking moment, knowing that these friends of so many years are separating for the next 5 years. It is also gut-wrenching when Max says she will keep in touch, because we know that that isn't the case. This works really well when included with the context of Before the Storm though, given the damage that Max's abandonment did to Chloe.
Keep quiet too, but they're bad at hiding anything. Don't look so worried, Max. It's okay. Come on, Dorkmeister. It's not the end of the world.
I should have just told you earlier. God, I feel so stupid.
Max, I said it was okay.
I was trying to tell you this morning,
But I totally distracted you with the pirate tape. Success.
Seriously?
I didn't want this hanging over us all day. Plus, I know you hate this kind of conversation, so I just left it alone, you know? Come on. I want to spend every minute we have together having fun.
We'll keep in touch, okay? And visit, and maybe we'll move back. Who knows?
Chill out. We can go to college together. It's gonna be fine. We're Max and Chloe, remember? We're always together. Even when we're not.
That's true.
Cool. Let's find something fun to do.
Then of course, Joyce comes out of nowhere and breaks the news that we all know to Chloe. That her father is dead. We don't hear the audio, but this is so tough to watch. The music is brilliant here, and I'll put the track up now because this isn't soundtracked like the first 3 episodes. After this, we get another funeral scene to end off a game. This one doesn't hit exactly as hard as Chloe's, but it's still gut-wrenching all the same. It ends with Max leaving Chloe and her mother alone at William's grave. And the fact that this is the last time Chloe and Max will see each other for the next 5 years is heart-stopping. It may be the saddest scene in the whole game, any game of Life is Strange, is when Chloe returns home and hears a tape recorder that Max left for her. I'm going to put up audio just now. This is even sadder if you didn't tell her about leaving. But this is one scene in any Life is Strange game that actually brought me to tears. It's the only one. Max tells Chloe this was the worst time for her to go, and she would give anything to be with her now, and that they will write and talk, which we know doesn't happen. Although she says that they will always be together, which does eventually happen. This brings Chloe to tears naturally, and me, and is a devastating way to end the story of Chloe and Max. This is the last time we physically see them. Another even more tragic thing, which just blows my mind, is that if you choose the sacrifice Chloe ending in Life is Strange, this is the last time Chloe ever hears Max's voice, I think. They text each other a bit before the storm. Maybe they phone called, but this might be the last time, and the funeral is the last time they ever physically saw each other. That blows my mind. There isn't much to say about this episode from a plot point of view, but it is top tier in pretty much every way you would want this kind of episode to be. It's lovely to see Max again. Every emotional beat hits, and it shows the first pieces of tragedy in Chloe's life, which leads to her character in Before the Storm. The events of Before the Storm naturally lead to the first game's events, which is an incredible ride. This episode is an easy A tier for me. I think it's too brief compared to other episodes to be ranked at the highest level, but this is definitely the most emotionally moving of any of these episodes that I reviewed so far. This is a great final instalment to the story of Max and Chloe, and is a fitting end to the characters that we love. Well, I guess that's it to end Before the Storm. Now, to end off, and I've already made most of my concluding notes in this game before the bonus episode, but I don't think this game is quite as good as the first one. But again, it does give it a run for its money. I just think the engaging nature of the first game's murder mystery plot makes it pretty unbeatable for Before the Storm, but they are quite different games, so I view them as more of a collective together. This game carries on the nostalgic nature of the Life is Strange universe, and I respect it greatly for that. Thankfully, this video ain't as long as part 1, but I've had just as much fun as making it. Hopefully the squeaky chair from the last part is fixed, but you might still be able to hear it a bit. Once again, you'll be able to see where I rank these episodes from worst to best in the final part of this series, but the next part of this series will be Life is Strange 2, which I'm looking forward to jumping into a completely new story with new characters. Finally, I would like to thank all those who have tuned in up until this point. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Part 3 of my Life is Strange series will be coming relatively soon. I'll see you then. Thank you.